What makes Nigeria democracy stand out amid global democratic challenges? It's not that its democracy is flawless, but that it is resilient, noisy, and deeply contested. Now, despite military interruptions, economic shocks, ethnic diversity, and security pressures, Nigerians continue to insist on elections. They also carry out public debate and civic, participation. That insistence matters. Nigeria also stands out for the intensity of citizen engagement outside formal institutions. Civil society, media, the academia, youth movements, religious bodies, and even satire play powerful democratic roles. Many democracies have institutions without energy. Nigeria has energy, sometimes, outrunning institutions. Ultimately, what you find is that Nigeria mirrors a global truth. That truth is that democracy today is not failing quietly. Democracy is being renegotiated loudly. That makes Nigeria not an outlier, but a frontline case study of where democracy is heading worldwide. Now, in terms of shared democratic blind spots and what lessons Nigeria could draw, well, let me say this. For a start, across Africa and Europe, a major blind spot is the assumption that procedures equal legitimacy. Elections are held, laws are passed, but citizens feel excluded from real influence. That gap between form and substance is where trust collapses. Another shared blind spot is political communication. Elites often speak about citizens, not with citizens. This fuels cynicism in Europe and frustration out in Africa. The lesson for Nigeria is very clear. Don't romanticize European democracy, but learn from its current anxieties, because there are lots of anxieties in European politics. I know that because I operate from here. Invest early in transparency, local accountability, and credible institutions, not as foreign prescriptions, but as survival tools. Now, take the issue of low voter turnout, and what it signals. Protest rather than apathy, and how government could rebuild citizens' trust. Now, the first step in that direction is to stop blaming citizens. Low turnout often means people feel their votes don't change anything. That is a rational response to perceived dishonesty or impunity. Trust is rebuilt when governments show consequences. Electoral malpractices punished, campaign promises tracked, public funds accounted for. Symbolic reforms without enforcement only deepens, mistrust. Equally important is proximity. Citizens must feel government closer to daily life. Local services working, representatives visible, feedback taken seriously. Trust doesn't return through speeches. Not at all. Trust returns through predictable, fair outcomes. Now, that brings me to the interrogation of whether Nigeria is forging a unique democratic model or shaped by its realities, or is nation struggling to adapt imported frameworks. Nigeria is actually doing both, if you ask me. And that tension defines the current moment. The constitutional framework is largely inherited, but the lived democracy is unmistakably Nigerian. What we see is not failure, but friction. Friction imported institutions, meeting complex realities of identity, inequality, and informal power. The danger is pretending the framework alone will solve this. Well, I have news for you. It won't. Nigeria's opportunity lies in honest adaptation, strengthening what works locally, reforming what doesn't, and, refusing the myth that democracy has only one valid expression, because democracy has several valid expressions. Even with its frictions and contradictions, it's often asked to what extent Nigeria's, democratic experience is influencing other emerging democracies in Africa and beyond. Well, Nigeria's influence is pretty significant and consequential, even when unintentional. As Africa's largest democracy, elections, counts, court rulings, protests, and reforms are closely watched outside Nigeria. When Nigeria innovates positively, judicial assertiveness, civic, mobilization, electoral technology, it sets precedent. When it falters, it normalizes, lowered standards elsewhere. That makes Nigeria a democratic signal country. Its choices quietly shape expectations across the continent and amongst diaspora communities globally, which is why, working to regain trust is extremely important. Now that brings me to how institutions regain trust when citizens see public debate as dishonest and elections as, unaccountable. Just yesterday, on the margins of the African Union Summit 2026, Nigeria's Yusuf Tuga, Minister of Foreign Affairs, played a leading role in hosting a ministerial forum on regional partnerships for democracy. Focal point? Restoring public trust. Among other focal points, I believe there were 3 of them in total. Now, institutions regain trust by becoming predictable and fair, not popular. Citizens can tolerate bad news. They cannot tolerate arbitrariness. And there's a huge difference between the two. This means transparent processes, independent oversight, and consequences for wrongdoing, even when, politically inconvenient. Once rules apply equally, trust slowly returns. It also requires humility. Institutions must acknowledge failures openly. In Europe, denial wasn't distrust. Nigeria must learn from that mistake, because it was a huge mistake and remains a huge mistake, and politicians are learning out here in Europe. In learning from Nigeria, Nigeria sends a signal of what it can and must do to actively shape global democratic thinking rather than, merely reflect, global trends. Here is how Nigeria can and must do it. Nigeria must speak from experience, not imitation. Its diplomats, scholars, and civil society should frame democracy as lived reality, not abstract theory. That means contributing ideas on managing diversity, which Nigeria, is blessed, some will say, cost in abundance. Informal economies, youth politics, and digital mobilization. Areas where Nigeria has deep practical insight. When Nigeria tells its own democratic story confidently, it stops being a mirror and becomes a reference point. I hear the non-verbal question: how can Nigeria do this when Nigerian citizens are, withdrawing from politics? Well, it is because they feel unheard. And what that really means for democracy is in real terms. Well, the point is this. Many citizens are not withdrawing from politics. They are withdrawing from formal politics. They remain vocal online, on dinner tables at home or around Mama Put Buka in Ring Road or somewhere there in Uselu Market. In communities, in activism, but of course, they feel excluded from decision making, the formal decision making. This actually signals danger and opportunity. Danger because disengagement weakens legitimacy. Opportunity because the appetite for participation still exists and very much present. Democracy survives when institutions catch up with citizens' energy, not when they suppress it. Now, do you know why I think all of these matter, even as naive as it sounds? Well, I tell you, if Nigeria succeeds in strengthening democracy at home, it could set a new standard for emerging democracies worldwide. A Nigeria that delivers credible elections, accountable governance, and inclusive growth would redefine democratic possibilities beyond Western templates. It should show that democracy can thrive amid diversity, inequality, and rapid change. These are conditions shared by most of the world, so you can actually say that it is universal. That success would not just inspire others, it would reshape global democratic confidence. And that is why Nigeria's democratic journey matter, they matter more and far beyond its borders.
GNA, on a mission to build